You mentioned the question of free speech. The Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, said yesterday the government will crack down now on comments it considers to be hate speech. This is what she said on a podcast hosted by Katie Miller, who is married to Trump's top deputy, Stephen Miller.
There's free speech and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything, and that's across the aisle.
Many conservatives criticizing those comments yesterday. Eric Erickson wrote bluntly, "Our Attorney General is apparently a moron. There's free speech and then there is hate speech. No, ma'am, that is not the law." Tim Carney wrote, "Bondi needs to correct herself and reaffirm her department's dedication to free speech." Others pointed to comments by Charlie Kirk himself, who tweeted last year, "Hate speech does not exist legally in America. There's ugly speech, there's gross speech, there's evil speech, and all of it is protected by the First Amendment. Keep America free."
I was wondering if you could talk about where you draw the line with free speech, hate speech, and slander.
It's a terrific question. My position is that even hate speech should be completely and totally allowed in our country. The most disgusting speech should absolutely be protected.
So, David French, that is what so many people who didn't know Charlie Kirk have learned in the last week about the way he conducted those forums, which is to allow anyone step up to a microphone, challenge him, ask him those questions. They may not have liked everything he said. We may not have liked everything he said, but that is the way he conducted his events, a conversation. So what would be your message this morning to Attorney General Bondi and others who are saying, now we are going to decide what constitutes hate speech within the outside of the First Amendment, apparently, and go after people who commit that?
You know, look, I think Joe said it very well just a moment ago. It is two things are true at once. What happened to Charlie Kirk was pure evil. It was horrific. It was tragic. It was also not just an attack on him that shattered a family by shooting him in the middle of a debate, a debate on college campus. It was an attack on the American experiment. You can say all of those things, but then turn around and also say, you do not diminish the First Amendment in response. You do not diminish constitutional protections of your political enemies in response to that evil act. And look, it's absolutely clear. This is not an ambiguous area of constitutional law. There is no sort of carve out from the First Amendment for so-called hate speech. And the reason for that's pretty obvious. We don't want to delegate to the government the responsibility or the authority to declare how far is too far in political debate, because guess what? The government's always going to be biased in that endeavor. The government's always going to be shutting down speech that's critical of powerful people. Charlie Kirk understood that. He said that very clearly on more than one occasion. That was a frequent theme of his. And so now we're seeing in some quarters of MAGA, including all the way in the Attorney General's office, what's really a statement's directly defiant of decades and decades of Supreme Court jurisprudence. And so it is an evil act, evil, horrible. It is not a reason to diminish the First Amendment.
Well, and Jen, you've worked on presidential campaigns. Sadly, a lot of times the best people don't run for president because you know you're going to be targeted by hate speech. You know that's going to be part of your day every single day. But can you imagine how stifled political debate would be in this country if years ago attorney generals decided they were going, according to that podcast, they're going to put handcuffs on people whose speech they decided was hateful?
Yeah, if a Democratic Attorney General had done that during Joe Biden's term, you know, and how that would have affected a presidential campaign. But to hear the Vice President of the United States use his office to talk like that and to take, you know, it feels like the country sort of figured out how to live with a division around Trump. Some people like him, some people don't like him. And now they're trying to force this whole other level of division on us that I think most people just don't feel, right? I mean, most Americans are just horrified by what happened to Charlie Kirk. Most Americans think, they understand, unfortunately, this happens in America with people who are very online. That's been sort of in the last few mass shootings. It's gone back to something like that.
Can I ask you a question?
Cultural,
on that point?
not political.
I was talking to a law enforcement officer after this happened, and he has kids. I have kids. We all have kids. And he said, "When are we going to do something
about that?
About online?"
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
All
free
the different
speech
factors.
is free speech.
Yeah.
But the fact that we continue to give these monopolies in Silicon Valley a complete free pass because of Section 230 and allow them to pollute our children's minds, allow them to do whatever they want to do and say, oh, you can never be sued because you're a monopoly and we Washington politicians are scared of you. How long are we going to allow that to happen?
Yeah, that and I mean, there's the regulatory problem. The internet as a whole, right? It's not just gaming. There's that problem, the problem of what happens on social media, but then also just young people's addiction to it, and particularly young men in America. You know, alienation and feeling a loss of opportunity. You know, Scott Galloway is way better about that than I am, but there is. I mean, that is a crisis here.
A real
and there's
and
not
growing crisis.
A real and growing crisis. And that would be a nice thing to hear the Vice President of the United States talk about, right? How are we going to deal with alienation? That would be good. Not using your sitting behind the desk in the official office to use your podium that way.
And pretending that Melissa and her husband had not been assassinated in their family home and also had 2 children left. Those 2 children orphaned.
Yeah.
Right? And all the other attacks that we've seen on the left and on the right.
Oh, sad.
And it's okay to say that because guess what? 80% of Americans say that. 80% of Americans say, what are we going to do? People that come up to you, what are we going to do, Willie? This is crazy. They voted for Donald Trump. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, they voted for Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and Bill Clinton. What are we going to do about this? Good, decent, sane Americans, at least 80% of us, everybody I talk to, like, what are we going to do about this? We have to come together. And yet you see some people, some politicians in Washington, D.C., and some people on news shows who actually were calling for civil war during the last presidential campaign, trying to do everything they can to divide people and to profit from it.
And to pull out the extremes, and they are extremes, and make them representative of the whole, which, as you say, is not what our country is. I don't know anyone, I didn't hear anybody who was celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. Of course, if you go online, if you look at a few tweets and you can find it, it is there. But by and large, people were not celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. Good people were not celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk, and they don't want us to go this way. And it has to be said, if you listen to that clip of Vice President Vance and then Attorney General Bondi, all these themes that they've been talking about for years now, the weaponization of government, lawfare, cancel culture, call people's bosses and get them fired, and free speech.
Right.
We just heard it all right there. That's exactly what they're doing.
They've turned it around.
Yeah.